remember one of the ones you add remember to the new model structure.
Pods like.
I think it is, but there's, I guess, the structure is ambiguous. So the tooling that Robert Jackson's writing, it'll automatically convert a classic structure to this new module structure. Works on pods apparently, but like doesn't work as well because the pod structure is ambiguous. So yeah, I imagine it won't be too difficult.
Who knows what we're talking about when we're talking about pods?
What's a pod?
I covered that in my my section of this year.
Never mind. That is a great segue.
We played that.
Yeah. The preview, so you have a hidey hole in your brain for this. Pods are a way of organizing files. It doesn't really have anything to do with code in particular. It has with what you call the files and what folders they live in. Cool. What else is going on in the Ember world?
Unification RFC is getting a lot of traction, and I highly recommend you read it. Maybe give my comment a +1 because I think it's going to destroy every test I've ever written. But basically, the idea is, if you've even read like some of the simple new Ember, if you do an Ember new and generate a route, and you get an acceptance test for it, you'll notice that it says something like visit my route and then expect route name to equal my route. So that and then is kind of like a tricky little helper that says wait for all asynchronous things to occur and then start doing assertions. So you can stack those like visit my route and then click this, or visit my route, click this button, fill in an input, hit click submit, and then assert that the server was called, right? So that and then is waiting for all of the asynchronous actions to happen. Well, that's kind of like very magic, right? Like it's waiting for things on the Ember run loop to just occur, and it's not exactly clear how that works. So the grand testing unification, it's a very interesting name, but basically the idea is that it would use the ES7 await, so it would be like await click, and the click would actually return a promise. So it would just use promises. I think it makes sense for new apps, but I'm like really terrified as someone who has 3 production Ember apps with like probably thousands of acceptance tests. The idea of having to rewrite every test I've ever written is terrifying. But it's a really interesting idea, so have a look at the grand unification RC.
Well, what I like about that is I think that it presents a really big barrier to Ember testing, that there's all these magic methods that come out of nowhere and like don't behave like anything else in JavaScript does. So it's like I think that's a step in the right direction, but yeah, there's a lot of Ember apps out there that have been doing idiomatic testing for a while, so yowza. Yeah.
So would you say that like apps that don't have a super large acceptance test suite wait until this is?
So it's just currently an RFC, so there actually isn't an implementation of it yet. Robert Jackson, I think, also wrote this one. But a big part of this is because he just got recently hired by Twitch. Twitch was on a very old version of Ember. There were 0 tests for all of Twitch.
Whoa!
Yeah, they're one of the largest Ember apps in production. Apparently there was like 2 tests. So he's looking at the testing landscape coming from that perspective, like, I got a blank slate. And I totally agree with the comments that everybody's making about and then being too magical. But as someone who has invested in Ember for several years, it's really terrifying to think about having to rewrite every test.
Was this the thing? Because I've written a lot of the acceptance tests for Ghost, and there's not a ton. Like there's still a bunch of them missing that need to be written. Yeah. So I'm just wondering. I guess it'd probably be good to write them.
Yeah, I mean, I think, and if you look at that RFC, I made some comments on there. Like my biggest concern is, as someone who has production Ember apps, like, what do I do? And is there a way that we could easily, using an AST parser or something, figure out how to convert these appropriately? I'm not convinced there is, but there might be that I'm not thinking about. So.
Which, speaking of Twitch, it wouldn't be a month unless I did my favorite comparison. So Wappalizer is a browser plugin that tells you what frameworks are running on a site. What's cool is that those phone home, and now they collect numbers on how often a framework is being used. So if we look at like the three big ones that everybody talks about, React, yeah, well, a lot of those are Facebook, to be fair, and the numbers are big, but really, like, having a React app is a lot like having a jQuery app. Yeah, but what did you write your app in? Because we wouldn't see these kinds of numbers with these kinds of names for Reflux or something like that, right? If we look at Angular, which is slightly more apples to apples, SomosMovies.com, #1. All right. Repro.ru, mg.olx.com.br, Varlamov.ru. Namecheap's real, PayPal's real, New Relic's real. New Relic was also on the React site, unsurprisingly. Freelancer, it's real. Weather.com, it's real. But, like, this isn't exactly like Hulu or something like that, right? But they're winning. Like, they won, right? They outnumber Ember apps 10-1.
You're recording this, right?
Yeah.
You want to share your screen for the web? The thing up versus looking at you?
Yeah, that's probably a good call. Oh, I don't.
You're beautiful, but I don't know about your pants being shown.
Yeah. Yeah. Excellent. It's not my pants, by the way. It's my boobs. Oh. Fair enough. All right, there we go. Screen share. So if we look at this for Ember, though, ooh, Twitch, that's huge. DigitalOcean, Crunchbase, Intercom.io, Heroku, GoDaddy, Travis CI, Ionic, SitePoint, Zendesk, real shit, all in the top 10, all wildly different apps. So, ta-da! And Twitch didn't have any tests until recently. Just fascinating. All right, awesome. Anything else cool happened in the Ember world?
Ed Faulkner gave a talk at DrupalCon
Mm-hmm.
about basically layering Ember on top of a Drupal site. If you're like into websites and not web apps at all, like go watch this talk. It's called like Amazing User Experiences with Drupal and Ember. It like blew my mind as someone that manages like a website in addition to web apps. Basically all the cool shit you can do with like animations and fast transitions between screens with Ember. Kind of like the TLDR is like he switches Drupal over to serve JSON API instead of HTML, and then hooks it all up to Ember, and it's like magic. It basically makes just like a website feel like a native app in terms of like transitions and animations. And he did it all in like 40 minutes of live coding.
Awesome.
It was really cool.
Speaking of Faulkner, him and Yehuda said like my two favorite things ever recently. So this is somebody talking about how useless Rails is because it gives you a false sense of simplicity, whereas what really happens is that the complexity is being hidden by convenient interfaces, which is called abstraction. And Ed Faulkner said, devs who argue against abstraction in general are just confused. They don't etch their own silicone or write microcode. Yes! Which is really kind of at the core of what the Ember value proposition is.
Was that in that article? I saw it got really high on Hacker News, something about like Rails is dead to me, or is that what that's from?
I think so, yeah. Cool.
Turned on Rails.
No kidding. Awesome. What else in the Ember world?
Open source night was pretty awesome.
Hooray! Open source night. Tell me about open source night. What's that?
Go ahead. All right. So we try to have open source night about once a month. it's kind of just like an open project night. So we try to come, the organizers try to come with some ideas. Well, let's figure out. David Baker comes with some
Yes.
ideas of things if you're interested in trying to contribute to open source in Ember. David Baker's on the docs team and the learning team, so he has some good insights as to what are some good areas that beginners can, if you're brand new to open source or to Ember, how can you contribute to the community? Or if you just want to work on something that find interesting that is remotely Ember related, we can just get together and act together for anything. So definitely check it out. We had an awesome turnout last time, and that went really well. And there were a few PRs that went out, so I have merged in. So
Definitely.
yeah.
And we have historically had like galvanized students in the first few weeks come in and get stuff done. I think we did this time too, right?
Yeah, there's a couple people that never even used Ember. Yeah, I think galvanized people was paired with Brett and I on something.
Yeah, we've had folks who came in with like just design backgrounds, and like they were able to submit pull requests, update, documentation, graphics, and things like that. Like not even code necessarily, just ways to help out.
So, and that guy in particular who punched up some of the graphics, Alex, he had maybe been a programmer for 2 weeks, never used Ember before, but he got PRs accepted that night for graphics updates. And then in true open source fashion, they gave him 30 other graphics to update. And now he has a cush job as a pretty high-ranking person on the MapQuest team. So, ta-da! It happens. Neat. Other Ember news?
Google I/O. There's a pretty cool talk about progressive web apps that compared Angular, React, and Ember came out looking pretty good, I thought. So that's a good one to go watch. It's Adi Asmati gave that talk.
Also from Google I/O, those of us who were at EmberConf where they talked about the advantages of web versus the advantages of native and how we can try to close the gap and by taking some of native's advantages away from it. Did you notice that Google basically did the opposite talk, where they were like, web has these advantages over native, and so native's going to take those away with instant apps and that kind of stuff. Either way, the consumer is going to win, but wow, is this going to get to be an interesting year for web app developers. Sweet. Other news?
The live global Ember meetup was really great. The videos are going to be out soon for that.
Who were the speakers at the global Ember meetup?
I was one of the speakers.
Oh!
I think some of the best talks were Runspire.
Myself?
I thought I was the best speaker personally. No, but Runspire did a really great talk on Flexi, which is like a DSL around Flexbox, which is pretty awesome, and kind of how he built that and talked about why CSS is sort of fundamentally broken and how Flexi tries to fix it, especially CSS for layouts. So when those talks come out, I would highly recommend Chris's talk. There's also kind of not related to Ember, a really good talk on building an engineering culture. So as your company grows, how to maintain engineering culture. By a guy who's the CTO at Ride.com, I believe. So that one was really good. I'll post on the meetup once those videos are up. Really good.
Cool. Other news? Going once? Going twice? Awesome. So we'll try to get these things booked out a little bit earlier, and we're also just experimenting with some different things at the meetup. And so, if you have any thoughts on location, frequency, we played around with having beginners talk up front, before the main meetup. Love to hear any thoughts on all that kind of stuff. We're trying to make this maximum content and maximum good use of everybody's time. So if there's anything else we should do before we hop into talks?
To that end, if you have an idea for a talk, please talk to me. I would like to start getting people scheduled out a few talks out. So I mean, if we're talking it could be months out. So if you have an idea for a talk, you have plenty of time to prepare. So if you have been thinking about giving a talk or have some ideas on talks that would be interesting to hear about, definitely let me know.
Amen to that.
And they don't have to be like 40-minute, 2-hour talks. Like if you want to do a 10-minute presentation on just like one cool thing that you learned about Ember, like that's fine. We're open to any formats. So.
Amen. And like at pretty much any level too. If you've got something beginnery, if you want to help out on like beginner workshop kind of stuff, if you have thought leadery kind of stuff, we want to have a little bit of everything in there. So please reach out.
I'm also going to put up a poll on the Meetup group on location. I'm going to put up a bunch of different locations. I know this is easier for some folks and harder for others, so I'll put up some options. Please make sure to vote in that, and we'll figure out a location that's easiest for everybody.
All right, banging. Anything else? All right, it is my distinct pleasure to introduce Frankie and the Zeros. Yeah!
Before we start, introduce Jessica's going to talk about Dinosaur JS.
Oh, awesome.
Yeah.
Okay, so hi everybody. I'm Jessica Gold. I'm one of the organizers for Dinosaur JS. With Frankie and Steve and so I think
Yay!
no, you haven't. Oh, okay. So they're going to talk about the website and like creative building it out. But quickly, Dinosaur JS is a job conference to be on June. So we're 29. Where's my countdown? I think we're 29 days away.
Yeah, we are.
Very close. It's right around the corner. Tickets are still for sale. It will be at the Oriental Theater. We're really excited. We've got some really great talks.
Okay, I think we're good. Can you see me okay? Is that working? Is it sharing? There it is. Okay, now we're good. Okay, cool. So I'm helping, like as Jessica said, with Steve, helping plan Dinosaur JS, and so it was our, we decided to take on building a new site for them as part of our help. And so we're going to kind of talk about building this Dinosaur.js website. And so I don't know how many of you have seen it. So let's go take a look at it. If you haven't seen it, then here it is. And we'll go into a lot more depth. And if you have seen it, hopefully we can give you some insight as to what it took for us to do it. So, all right, cool. So my name is Frankie Bushell, and I own a web development company called Zero. Formerly Zero, we're actually changing names to Ultrafragula for a number of reasons. And so we just started pushing it out with this new site, so you'll see a little credit to Ultrafragula, so I thought there'd be a little bit of, should explain that a little bit. So from going forward, we'll hopefully be fully launched before the meetup, or before the conference, so you'll see a little bit more about that. So formerly Zero, now Ultrafragula, so pretty exciting. And Dave and Brett, who are also part of our team, will be helping me present as we kind of go through this. So, and just a little bit of background about us. Here's our little tagline. We're a creative development studio, so we do everything from web-based products, helping companies build out their web apps, their web products. We do websites. We do web experiments. We kind of are this all-encompassing digital studio, and we had chosen to go down the Ember route like 2.5, 3 years ago. So we've been using Ember since pre 1.0 and just really fell in love with the framework. So we're kind of Ember and Rails, and we're kind of experimenting and playing with Phoenix a little bit. Yeah, so most of our stuff revolves around just building products, and we do some consulting. And yeah, so if you know anybody or you're in need of anything, please reach out to us. So specifically about Dinosaur.js, here's where some of our challenges. We decided to build it as a team. I had kind of started down this road a little bit, and it was just taking me forever in my side time. And so we're like, okay, we're just going to rebuild it as a company. It's going to be fun. We said we're going to take 1 week to do this, this little sprint. Some of the other challenges were kind of portraying the goals of the conference a little bit. So we just wanted to have this thing that was kind of inviting but unique, kind of show off all the fun ways you can use JavaScript. Of course, we wanted to write it all in JavaScript. So previously it was just a flat site on Jekyll. So we're like, okay, we've got to actually use JavaScript since it's a JavaScript conference. And we really didn't want to disappoint Steve. So that was kind of the big thing. So those were the challenges we were up against. So when we were looking at kind of a short timeline for this and something that we can do, just a flat site, since it was just going to be us maintaining it, we obviously chose Ember Cly since that is what we are best with. We were kind of exploring using some other technologies, trying out React a little bit just as a learning thing, but ultimately we're so quick in Ember, we chose to go down that road. We used Pixie.js, which Brett will go into a little bit for the homepage to do some fun experimentation in JavaScript. We use HTML5 Camera, which we'll also show you a bit of. We use Ember Cly Deploy, and we have a little Express app that's hosted on Heroku that's serving up our flat site from all the assets from AWS, which we'll also go into a little bit later in a little bit more detail. So I'm just going to talk for a minute about design before we dig into, pass it off to Dave to talk a little bit more about some of the development stuff. So initially when we started this, we kind of designed as we went without a whole lot of plan ahead of time. And as we were kind of going through it, the biggest thing we wanted to do was kind of step away from traditional design. If you look at most websites, like 99% of websites are pretty damn similar in the way that they do. There's just clean typography and nice big images. We kind of wanted to try and step away from all that and just make something a little bit more obscure, play with just large, almost obnoxiously large fonts, high contrast, use a lot of new technology since we got to choose the stack, and just really experiment. So we wanted to use HTML5 Camera, played with that a little bit. We wanted to use Pixie. And so all that kind of came in. So that's kind of kind of wanted to explore these extremes, blow up the cursor size and make this a really like playful thing that people actually want to explore around the site and find out more about the conference, as opposed to going there just for information's sake. So we know that people really like movement, so we tried to incorporate as much movement and hovers and just satisfying usage as we could. So you'll see a lot of that. Experiment with weird ideas, make people a little bit uncomfortable, not sure what the hell that they're looking at, all those things we just wanted to kind of play around with. And all of that is, the whole context is that this JavaScript conference is just kind of, it reaches a whole breadth of different topics. We kind of wanted to show that you can use JavaScript in a lot of different facets and really just let it be something that, shows where people are going to be presenting on some really interesting topics, so we hope that the site kind of reflects that. So that's why we were kind of coming from design. We were kind of designing as we went along a little bit. So I had these like initial concepts in my head, and then Brett and I or Dave and I would kind of just play with some different ideas as we were just kind of styling things in the browser. Which, when you have a nice set, like a nice CLI like Ember CLI, you can just quick iterations are great. So we were just kind of designing in the browser, which is really fun. So, and now I'm going to pass it over to Dave, and he's going to talk a little bit more, dig a little bit more into the code.
Can we swap our computers?
Yes.
You should unmute.
Carol?
Screen share.
Yeah.
And share. It's the reason the resolutions.
That's a resolution. That's a resolution you wanted, right? 486.
Yeah, this is great. Okay. We didn't. Well, when we planned this, we knew we didn't have a beginner's track, so my talk is basically catered toward beginners. I saw we had a few of you here. Have y'all ever used Ember at all? No. Okay. Sweet. Well, I'll give you. If I can find it.
Yeah, you gotta hit your desktop.
Say what?
Go back to the window you were just in.
Go back to Hangout.
Sorry.
That one. Yeah. And then go right to screen share.
Yeah, choose desktop.
All right. Sorry about that. All right. So I thought I was going to give a brief overview of Ember, then show a little bit of the code and route structure we did, and then give an example of a component, which is a pretty common thing within Ember. So when you go to a URL for an Ember app, that's not readable at all. Hold on.
System preferences. If you want to keep talking, I can do this.
Yeah. Thank you. Yep. So when you hit a URL with an Ember app, was that set on my desktop?
No, when you plugged in, it was just really small.
Huh?
How many software engineers?
Well, I don't present often.
Yeah.
There we go. Look at that. Nice. Perfect.
Ooh.
Yeah.
Yeah. So
Now it's reading.
That's what Ember does. So when you hit a URL within an Ember app, you first hit your router.js file, which basically is handling the request and telling you which actual route to go to. There we go. It goes down to an actual route, which pulls in data and routes that either to the model or the template itself. Then within a template, you have components that you can render basically little. It's like compartmentalized logic and HTML views. When we were setting up the site, as I graduated from Turing last year, so I'm a relatively new developer. And I was a little bit intimidated to jump into Ember just because it is kind of a larger framework as far as JavaScript frameworks go. But the more I got to play with it, there's certain things I really liked. The first of which is the CLI, which we learned Rails at Turing, which the benefit of being able to type in a command line, Rails new or Ember new, or generate a route or a controller or a component just through a command line. It sets up all the boilerplate code for you and just makes it so that you don't have to type these repetitive kind of uninformative things over and over. It has declarative templates where Ember templates you can write a small amount of code that can be iterated over and display a large amount of information in a short amount of code. It's opinionated, which as a new developer it helps figure out what the best way to do things is. Has good documentation, which is great for problem solving, and a great community, which you can see here. All right, the Dano routes and structure. We didn't pull in Ember data at all for this app, which there's no backend at all. The model hook is basically serving up an array of Ember objects, which we're iterating over to display all the information for like a speaker's route or whatever. I know I mentioned earlier that I would go a little bit over pod structure. We love pods at Zero. It's just a basic way of organizing information within your Ember app. The default structure is you'd have individual files within a folder like controllers, routes, or templates. Whereas pods, it's organized by folder name. Oh, sorry. And then we decided to use CSS transitions for this app instead of something like Liquid Fire, just because it was easier to pull in. They gave us more flexibility in terms of what we could actually do with a lot of the smaller things. I was going to give a brief example of one of the components we built, which is it's really small. So when you read Ember docs, you'll read a lot about a movement towards everything's going to be component-based. This is an example of a very simple, contained Ember component. It's basically just it's pairing logic with a bit of markup. So this component, basically, we have certain attributes, days, hours, minutes, and seconds. We're showing, sorry. It's this little countdown right here, which is basically just a countdown till when the event starts. And all it does is grab, it sets attributes, days, hours, minutes, and seconds, has a little bit of logic to calculate the time till then, and then uses Ember to set those. And this did render is basically saying when the component enters the page to call this function every second. So that's pretty much it.
From the templates.
Yeah. Ember components are nice because you can lock. It provides data binding where you can basically, within a component, identify certain things that you want to present on the page, and then render those directly within the template. So we have days, hours, minutes, and seconds here, and the output of this template is you use the handlebar syntax to basically just show the things that you're going to render on the page, and then if you want to use it, you can use also handlebar syntax to show that component and render it on the page. Sorry.
So if you were using another template extension, like if you were using Jade, for example, could you embed that handlebar syntax in there and dynamically move through those variables?
I don't think handlebar or HTML bars plays very well with Jade. It's kind of biased towards traditional HTML syntax.
when you buy into Ember, you buy into HTML bars.
Mm.
People don't use a different templating language. The Glimmer engine, which is what Ember uses to render the DOM and make transitions between single pages, is pretty much specifically designed for HTML bars or handlebars. Whereas in Rails, you could choose like handlebars, Jade, whatever. Like if you're using Ember on the front end, you're probably using handlebars.
That's pretty much it for a very brief overview of what Ember does. Brett's going to show you a little bit more of the logic that we did with Pixie and a few other things.
Yeah.
Woo!
Okay.
Has anybody used Pixie before?
You're gonna like this.
Does anyone use like 3JS or anything that are that?
We were talking about all that last night.
Oh, nice. They're surprisingly easy. Like, it's very approachable, I think. I mean, you can do a lot, but they're really fun to play with. Especially if you just like want anything, you just want like instant gratification. Mute yours. Hello, hello.
Awesome. So,
Uh-oh.
still an echo?
I think your microphone's actually working.
Oh, my mic is working. No. Okay.
Is it on this one?
Nope.
Yeah, this one's muted. Is yours muted?
Might just do this from the bottom of a tunnel.
Where is that one?
Who all has microphones joined in this hangout here now?
It's just there are two laptops and me, and then
Are your speakers?
Yep.
Both of our speakers are muted. I have my microphone muted.
It's the sound coming over these speakers.
Oh,
Are you still joined into the Ibotta hangout I shared a while ago?
no. Close to that one.
The only way that it can be coming through this.
you guys have your volume off on both laptops.
Volume off
Yeah.
on both
Like
laptops.
sound is muted.
Sound is muted.
That's muted.
Oh, he can't mute because he's on HDMI, and the sound's going through the HDMI output.
So open up system preferences and change your sound up there.
We can figure this out. Here we go. How's that?
Yeah!
Huzzah! And that's my presentation. That's how to change your sound output. Okay. All right. Accordion component. So this is just a little brief example for like sort of starting at the where's .js? Okay, here we go. So I think this is just on speakers, and it's just here we go. This little guy. So it's just essentially a toggle. So really basic functionality, and that's all it's doing. So if we look at this component, we have a template. We have the actual component JavaScript file. Oh, no. It never ends. Okay, so essentially you can ignore this. That was just for like touch events. We have this isOpen property, and we're just toggling that. And so in our template, we have our open and close text that we're passing into the component, and we just have this action that just says, that just calls that toggle action. And then this, based off of isOpen, displays one of these two classes so that we can animate it.
So we use this a lot throughout the site just so we could have
Yeah.
our own kind of easing functions and kind of
Exactly.
CSS transitions, because it was kind of like outside of what a lot of the Liquidfire stuff is. So I mean, Liquidfire is awesome for those things. We use it for it. We just wanted to use a lot more weird CSS transition stuff. So
Yeah.
you'll notice like the menu and stuff is like an example of that. So
Yeah, and we actually, the several applications before this one, we used a lot of Liquidfire. We wrote some awesome custom Liquidfire transitions and stuff. But with this site, it was kind of an opportunity to like mess around with stuff that we don't always do. And so we kind of wanted to try and flex some CSS transitions and animations and stuff.
I have a question.
Yeah.
Is the if helper the canonical way to do that now? Because I thought there was a syntax once upon a time that would do exactly what you're doing
Class
there.
name bindings?
Yeah.
Honestly, I am not sure. Class name bindings is a great way of doing it as well. Honestly, I often use class name bindings, so we just do. Well, we don't have to do it. I'm not gonna.
The tag itself.
Yeah.
The tag itself,
Yeah,
and not
I think it would be for
things within the tag.
Well, yeah, and I thought there was a syntax in HTML bars also that was like a shorthand for doing that same thing. It was before HTML bars. I
There
guess.
was when you didn't have we had bind adder.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Then you
If
had
you don't want to
special
use
class
it,
syntax.
So-
So it's not necessary.
So that's what I'm asking. Is that the way that you're supposed to do that now?
Cool. So that was just sort of a basic little component, very similar to what Dave just showed us. And next I'm going to move on to Pixie. So what is Pixie? Why do we use it? Pixie is a 2D WebGL renderer with a canvas fallback. As Frankie briefly mentioned, we like to do we do sometimes web experiments, and just kind of one of my hobbyist things is WebGL, and we all like to kind of poke around with it. And what we've traditionally used in the past was just like 3JS. We've used this small little framework called Paper.js, a good number of things, and I had done a few hobby projects in Pixie, but we hadn't ever actually used it with an actual live site, so we were kind of stoked to get an opportunity to use it. It's very sprite-based. If you're not familiar with, and WebGL is sort of it's an OpenGL renderer for the web, and it's just sort of like an animation framework that renders into a canvas tag. And then, so we used Pixie. It's highly sprite-based, which sprites are essentially like, it's just like a flat texture, or like an image you can think of. Sprites are often used, like you can think of like traditional old school like 2D video games like Mario and stuff are usually sprites, and they're almost like GIFs where you have a big image and a bunch of images in a row that if you stacked them on top of each other and flipped through them, it'd be like a little flip book animation. That's what Pixie leverages a lot of the times, and it's really fast. So Pixie's awesome. How do we integrate Pixie? Well, fortunately for us, and it's actually pretty easy to integrate without it, but there is an Ember Clyde Pixie.js add-on. It's by SimpLabs, which they do Ember Simple Auth, so the name probably looks relatively familiar to some of you guys. And so what are the basics of a Pixie animation? Well, you have a canvas tag, you have a renderer, and you have a container. So the renderer takes everything and animates it.
Brett, I just want to interrupt you real quick. We have a community member who's graduating from Denver to Florida. He's been with us for a while now, and we'll miss him like hell. He's been a guest speaker twice now?
Yep.
All right. Good, buddy. Once more a day.
So yeah, what are the basics of a pixie animation? We have a canvas tag, we have a render, and a container. So the render, maybe I should start with the container. The container is a collection of all the objects, so like the sprites that you want to add to your animation. Often it's referred to as the stage, particularly in Pixie, because you're essentially putting all of your things onto the stage, which is sort of rendering your scene. And then the renderer is what actually takes all of those things and animates it inside of a loop, so sort of like a game loop. So let's take a look at our Pixie and kind of step through the code. So let's see, that's not it. Here we go. Okay, so with the plugin, what it does is it gives you this Pixie canvas, which is just their own extended little component. We have this draw hook that gets called. And so, not to like dig through everything, but you can see we're instantiating a stage, we're instantiating a renderer, and then they give you a nice little mouse position that has a lot of sort of properties on it. And then we can load images into our Pixie scene and use those. So maybe at this point I should show you the actual animation. If you haven't already seen it. So this is what we sort of came up with. We did a bunch of them. What it's doing is it's actually just scrolling through an image of a bunch of kind of gargly goo code. We took a bunch of code and inserted dinosaur names and Steve Kinney's name a lot, and different things like that. And digging through Pixie, one of the cool things we found on it was this thing called a displacement filter. And if you've gone through WebGL and wet rendering and all that, there's a thing called displacement maps, and it essentially does that. It takes one image and it makes a map from that image. So it essentially takes the gradients and the shades and just assigns it a bunch of values depending on what the values of those colors are. And then it takes that map and takes it to this image and puts it on top. So, and we also tied that to the mouse. So it makes the displacement filter more severe or less severe in the center, more severe to the right. And then it also shifts our image in the background that's continuously scrolling. That's the basic concept. So we have our image. That's our main image. We have our setup. Ignore that. We have the loop. There may or may not be a Konami code in here. And we have a resize function. So that's the basic ins and outs of this. So in the setup, that's sort of like our initialization. We're importing a tiling sprite. That's the code. We are taking the displacement sprite. So let me just pull up what that looks like. Displacement. Texture right here. So that's what that looks like. So it's literally just taking that cloud and just giving it a bunch of, it's just pulling the image in different ways. A lot of people use this in like 3D rendering. They use this to actually give depth to like a texture. It's actually very CPU intensive for big 3D rendering, but it looks really good. So we're adding this to the container, displacement sprite, and then we're taking the displacement filter, and Pixie gives you a displacement filter function. We're scaling that, we're adding it as a filter, and then we're adding that to the stage. And then from there, we're just calling the loop. And then in the loop, which is where it's probably most understandable without having your head in this code, we're doing stuff with the mouse. So we get our mouse position, and we are getting sort of percentages of the screen from it. And we're just saying, okay, we'll take the scrolling image and the tile position in the Y direction and speed it up or slow it down. So we're going to add to the current value and give that a multiplier. Likewise for the X direction, except we're not actually speeding it up, we're just kind of shifting it over. And then with the scale, this is where it's affecting the severity of the actual displacement filter. So, just as kind of like a fun little experiment, I thought we'd take one or two other images like this and see what that displacement filter looks like. So this is just called displacement.jpg. Sorry about that. Let's go to our texture. Displacement.jpg, is that right? Trial displacement. And so, oh no. So that should, as soon as this, okay. This file change sometimes takes a minute. So it looks like this now. Eek. Okay. Oh, that's exactly what we want. Okay, so by design, intentional. So as you can see, this one looks a lot less intense. It
kind of does it in like curvy,
yeah,
more like diagonal.
And you can see there's a lot less sort of gradient on that image. Like this image looks like that. So it's a little bit less extreme, but you kind of see how it works. Let's do it with.
And you can also play with like the scales, X and Y scales. Just like
Yep.
It's like you can just literally.
Yeah, you can do some pretty cool stuff. What it's actually typically used for is a lot of times in like the 2D games and animations and stuff, they'll use it for like over lava or something that has heat. You can create like good heat waves. Another example they used right here, this is on the Pixie site, and this is where we saw that displacement filter. They're just kind of doing it as like a magnifying glass. And if you look, I kind of pulled up down here. That's what their image looks like. So you can kind of see the gradient, just like does that little like bubble distort.
You guys make the grayscale.
Yeah. I think Frankie did, right? Yep. And then I just threw in this one, I think of Steve, like that. And so you can kind of see his face in there, which is kind of cool. It's just kind of interesting to see like what different images do. And let's go back here, and sorry, this will be the last one. Texture. Let's just set that back, and then I'll show you what happens when you change out the tile image underneath. And I'll do that real quick because we're just going to use the Konami code. Spoiler alert.
Steve's about to walk to the door too, so it's perfect.
Oh yeah. Come on. God, this is taking forever to swap out those images. Okay, so here's the regular one. Up, up, down, down, left, right, BA. So that's what it looks like on a face. This is kind of fun. Fun / terrifying. I like when his eye like goes right on this warp right here. But anyway, that's what the displacement filter does, and that's sort of like a brief example of Pixie.js. It injects its own canvas for you.
By the way, if you weren't at Denver Script last night, that's not what Steve looks like right now.
Yeah.
He had to look like an adult the last couple of days, so he has a very different appearance.
Okay, so that's a sort of whirlwind introduction to Pixie and how we used it. The camera. So we also ended up just kind of like messing around. We were messing around with this a little bit ago and talking about how kind of fun it is to access the camera. And so we decided to throw one in, and we're just using the like default get user media HTML5 camera. It's awesome because you can see yourself, and it was really fast to implement. The bad part about the HTML5 camera is it's not widely supported. There's a lot of mobile that doesn't support it. But this was one site where it didn't really matter. And also where we used it, that's not what I want. It's not really relevant to like actually have it. We just thought it was kind of fun to like.
Yeah, we wanted to like call people out and be like, hey, you need to buy tickets.
Yeah, like when you're attending, it's like, I need to join. So yeah, I mean that's pretty much the camera. I think that component pulled up over here, and we're just checking for support. If it is, we're going to throw this supported flag, and then we just say, okay, well, throw the video tag in there and tie the source to the camera source, which that's what we're doing. So
All those spans.
yeah, all those spans. So that's for individually animating this little text right here. I know it's kind of a ridiculous file, but
Yeah.
don't look.
Each that shit, baby.
Yeah, so that is our camera. And after that, maybe a quick run through of the deployment. So that was another major factor in us choosing Ember as, or I guess kind of a minor factor, but we love the Ember CLI deploy, and it's super easy to use. So we use this package called Ember CLI deploy, specifically the Ember Lightning Pack. So it uses Redis S3, build, manifest, gzip, display revisions, and revision data. The main ones to really know are Redis and S3 for this guy. And we also used a node server to deploy, and specifically used the plugin written by Ben Limmer.
Fancy.
Always stoked to use that. So this is our little deployment node app, and as you can see, it's very, very small. And what it does is when we run a Ember deploy, it fingerprints our build so that we have the specific commit that we're deploying, and it pushes up our minified JavaScript, CSS, and assets into a Amazon S3 bucket, and then it pushes an index.html file to a Redis instance on our Node app. And what Redis is it's just essentially a key value store. It's like a gigantic hash that acts sort of like as a database. And so what's cool is the key is the commit number, and the value is the HTML index.html file referencing the fingerprinted assets of that version of the commit. So what we can do is we can actually do a really quick deploy. In fact, let's change something. And what's awesome about deploying is I'm going to deploy, but it's not going to activate. And I can tell it to activate that commit, and then it'll always just serve that on the dinosaurjs.org. But if I don't tell it to activate that commit, it'll just be in that key value store, so I can check the deployed version without other people having to actually look at it.
This is great. We use this often with clients, with web apps. When we're deploying a new feature, we can deploy the feature to a specific commit and have them check it out before we even activate it. It's a really nice workflow for us and for them to be checking things, and they're always super impressed by it. So it's a good win.
Yeah.
Then you should start charging for that.
He's been charging us for like months.
That's right. Premium access package.
Just photos of you.
That's right. Every time.
Customer service is awful. We always call, it puts us on hold forever.
Or you get locked out. In the building.
Yeah. I bought it. It's closed.
Sir.
So I just changed this. And I believe we have like a little CSS warning in here. So while this is deploying, maybe I can run you through. So there's actually two files that you really have to know about for Ember CLI deploy. So you have your Ember CLI build, and inside of your config, you actually have a deploy.js. And so let's look at the Ember CLI build. So what it gives us is it gives us our fingerprint options. So we're telling it which extensions we want to actually fingerprint, enabled, and then we have different fingerprinting options for different environments. And I mean, that's essentially it. Like a lot of this stuff is actually generated for you when you install the packages and run follow the little like install guides. And then there are minor things you have to tweak here and there depending on your environment. So if we look at our build, this is where actually the bulk of our Ember-Cli deploy setup occurs. So what's happening is we have our different deployment targets, development, QA, and production. Ours were predominantly, in this app, we only have really production and dev right now. But we're just essentially setting our S3 credentials. Don't actually put these in this file. That would be bad news bears. And then, like our Redis URL, access key bucket, but all this stuff, like as you can see, it's a very small file, and it does a ton of stuff for you. So it's really awesome. Let's see if this is deployed. 35%. And so it might be kind of slow right now. But what's cool is while this is deploying, we still have, let's go to dinosaurjs.org, we still have a working live site. And there's not going to be any hiccups in this. And then if we chose to activate, switching that key within our Redis store is really quick because we've already deployed. So when you're switching to a new version, you're not going to have a lot of downtime. Oh no, timeout. Well, that's not good.
It looks like one of the other,
Internet's too slow.
Go back and just look at one of the list of deploys and just.
Yeah, cool.
If you go back to like 3 or 4, it'll be the old homepage.
Is it colon list?
Yeah, colon list and then environment.
Oh yeah. Okay. So I actually did a little deploy right before I came when I switched to that other filter. So we'll just use that one and see that difference.
What are the firewalls blocking that Redis port?
I was actually
Oh.
it's probably our
Yeah, it's probably not any timeout really.
That is no worries.
Yeah, not 9478. Yeah, it's probably not going to go through this time either.
Shoot.
If you happen to
Well-
know the Git hash codes,
Do you have the
any
do you have the
recent
index key in
commits,
your history for an
Yeah.
Oh, you know what? I probably do.
Yeah,
Yeah,
if you have
question
the
mark,
activate,
index key.
you could use that. Yeah.
Next key. Shimon.
Or what about on your
Guess some
command line?
numbers.
Internal history of doing activates. When you search back for activate.
Oh yeah. So that's.
I didn't activate it though.
Oh, you know the one. Yeah.
Yeah. Okay. Well,
Yeah.
anyway, there's this index key. I could put my commit number up here that it assigns it, or my fingerprint, and we'd see the new version right up here. And if you
Plugin
want,
should warn you. At least you can see that it was like trying to grab it. If you put in a garbage index key, it'll be like, yeah.
Oh yeah,
Oh,
it should
cool.
give you a warning. Yeah. Yeah, yeah.
hey, there we go.
The site is down.
It's still bueno.
It's not critical.
Critical false. That's the important part. Bug report, damn it.
So anyway, that is the deployment. If you want to, Ben did an awesome talk at one of the other Ember meetups solely on that, so I definitely recommend checking that out. So yeah.
Yeah, so all the code is on our GitHub, so welcome to pull that down and play with it.
Are you accepting pull requests?
Yeah,
You
for sure.
Make you a contributor.
Yeah, so feel free to go check it out. So keep in mind we did it in a week, so be nice. Yeah, and if you want to get a hold of us any other route, to Twitter, hello, email, all of which will be switching over to Ultra Fragla in the next month. So
No.
yeah,
Really?
yeah, of course, change our name.
And like people, honest to God, ask me about that. Like,
Really?
did Sarah change their name? Like, no.
We're going to next month. That's what'll happen.
Coming soon.
Can't have any bad Ian Juju around. So
All right, questions.
Questions? Any questions for the Frankie and the Ceros?
I've got some.
Yeah.
So building this like Node API right now, very basic type thing. I'm about at the point where I have it spitting out JSON. So from what I can tell, like Ember's a front end framework. So is it a replacement for Angular? Is it an alternative to Angular? And if so, what are the benefits that you get with Ember that you wouldn't get with Angular? Apart from, as Kyle pointed out, giant apps use it besides Google.
Why do those giant apps use it, guys?
I'll give you some opinionated answers.
Yeah.
I can give you opinion Kyle a mic and like just let him go for an hour now.
All right, listen, folks, let's get real.
As a beginner, having an opinionated framework where there's certain ways to do things that are the best ways to operate, you're learning practices that are used by default by people that have been doing it for a very long time. I think it's a steeper learning curve up front because I played with Angular a little bit. And you kind of make stuff work with Angular. You can't really do that with Ember, but if you get it working with Ember, it's generally
you get it working well. Yeah.
So it's almost like secondary learning, if that makes sense.
Sure. Like, yes, and as somebody who's nominally an expert web developer, whatever the fuck that means, you also get the benefit of not having to rewrite the same bullshit for like the 1,000th time that somebody else has already solved. That's the advantage of an opinionated framework on the other side of it.
Sorry, Steve.
You also get all the benefit of all the learning that everybody else who's built the framework. So like there are folks who are way smarter than me who have spent many more years in web development built this framework. And they've thought of and solved problems that I don't even know exist.
Yeah.
And I'll never have to know they exist because they're hidden by the framework.
Yeah.
So like it just completely takes away that layer, and you get like if I encounter a problem and I submit a pull request and it's solved by Ember, then you don't have to solve that problem. And so then we get to share the learning.
Yeah, and I liked one of the points that I like. I mean, it's all of those points, and then I love it when people talk about how it might not be the most trendy. Like right now it's not React. A little while ago it wasn't Angular, but it's people who choose it chose not to do the trendy framework, and I feel like that has sort of led to a really awesome community because people aren't doing it just because it's the next hotness. And
because Google sponsored it.
Yeah, exactly. Like, and even though it is like I think it is the hotness, but I feel like there's a lot of people that choose React just because it's the buzz, but people who chose Ember, particularly in the past, chose it because they really did their research and they found that they really liked it, and I just feel like it's a really solid community around it. So
just like trying to gauge my learning towards, or guide my learning towards, frameworks that are going to be applicable in the deployment environment. Obviously, you guys use it here, so there's jobs.
Yeah. And there's a lot of companies that use it now.
There are, and they're good companies.
Yeah.
I'll say that Angular outnumbers every other framework probably 10 to 1 or more. But how many jobs do you need, man? You need 100 jobs, or you need one good job? And like, take a look at the Wapalizer results. Like real apps, like Ibotta, for example. Good companies like walk past the trendy shit and went with the good shit.
Exactly.
And so like it's a smaller playing field, but like you only have to win once, right?
And it gets upgraded a lot. I mean, it's always taking a look at other frameworks and what they're doing really well, and taking a look at what it's doing and what it's doing not well, and switches it up, adds in the cool stuff, takes out the bad stuff, and it's it performs really well. And I don't know, it's just a great framework.
I think going back to the job applicability concept, Ember being very convention oriented, this is the way to do it. You can drop into an Ember shop and be able to function and produce and contribute from day one. Whereas Angular, there are 1,000 ways to do everything. So having Angular experience doesn't really buy you that much more than just having jQuery or JavaScript experience. Whereas having Ember experience, You're an Ember developer. You know how to do it.
I've never seen an Ember or an Angular app that looks the same as another Angular app.
Yeah.
But like somebody can be in Venezuela and go, hey, I'm having a hard time with my Ember app, and like I can locate like at least the structure of their app and figure out where everything is instantly. Because it's exactly the same as every Ember app I've ever written.
Yeah.
That's because I've read a lot into, I've been part of the Ember developers of Ghost for a while. And the reason they had a backbone client initially, and they switched over to using Ember for a number of reasons, but the primary one was of what you were saying is that it's exactly the same no matter where you go. And so you have people, I mean, Ghost has people that contribute it from around the world. And so a big project like that, you have all these different opinions about how it should be structured, how the actual front end should be structured. But with Ember, you're just like, you do it this way or you don't do it, essentially.
I mean, and that does have downsides, definitely. I mean, we don't want to sugarcoat it. You know, there are advantages to ultimate flexibility and ultimate configuration, but you know, if you're looking for quick, speedy development and quick ramp-up time, this is the kind of framework.
Well, and especially since like all of those kinds of like super configurable things, about 99% of the time are bike shedding, like waste of time conversations. And with Ember, all you write is the application, not the underlying plumbing. And like the application is what delivers value to your customer, to the company, to whatever else, not the fact that you went Jade over handlebars or semicolons, no semicolons, tabs, no tabs, this architecture pattern, this architecture pattern. That, like, your customer didn't give a shit about any of that. You only write the part that generates value.
So is it fully maintained by a community, or is there
It's all open source.
private backing?
Yeah, so we're using Ember at RTE as the agency. I think that one of the big reasons is because it's all open source. It's just a big open source community. There are corporate sponsors that sponsor work on it, but if they're sponsoring open source work on the product, there's no big corporate sponsor guiding it. Like Angular, you've got Google deciding to kill Angular 1 and go to Angular 2. With React, you have Facebook that's just deciding that they're going to open source whatever parts of React they want to open source. So with Ember, it's just this big community of developers from a whole host of different companies that are all contributing. And it's a long-term project and a long-term vision that all the people that work on it are committed to, because they use it at their jobs and they're invested in the long-term viability of the framework. Whereas with Google, you know, they can drop Angular 1 and not be at my head, because they have the resources to move on to the next thing. Like Ben was saying earlier, like Google can rewrite 1,000 tests and not be denied, but like a company like Ibotta or we need the stability.
And there is a Haas core team backing it too. The core team does a really good job.
Yeah.
So isn't that the exact issue you guys were discussing at the beginning of this? That they're looking, the open source community is looking at abandoning the previous testing framework?
No, I think the difference is that with Google, they're going to just make the decision, right?
Yeah.
And what I was talking about was the RFC, the request for comments. So major things in Ember have to undergo an RFC process or request for comment. So they opened a proposal, and the idea, there's this like template, and it says, here are the positives I see, here are the downsides, and anyone can go in there and comment. So I went in and I was like, this is going to be a fucking shitstorm for me, like if this happens. Here are the things that I need to think about, and I've gotten some really great responses, and ultimately, if that's the way the community needs to go, I understand, and as long as there's a way to help migrate, that's a great thing, but again, it's a discussion. It's not like Google saying, like, by the way, we're using TypeScript, and it's going to be totally different, and hope you enjoy it because we've made these decisions.
Which is exactly what happened.
Yeah.
Like, Angular 2 was given to that community, and the community reacted incredibly negatively to it, which, like, it's, like, even if those things sound kind of similar, they are night and day. Like, the subtle difference there is everything.
It's like invitation as opposed to asking people.
Right. Like, and it, like, something like Angular 2 and, like, the reaction that got would be impossible in every sense to happen in Ember. Since it's so community-driven, like, you can't get surprised. It was actually kind of an issue at EmberConf this year because they couldn't have any big bang cool announcements because everything happened so slowly and so transparently that everybody kind of knew about everything already. And like, there's no secret backdoory thing that could really happen. And so that takes some of like the Google I/O or Apple conference like excitement out of it, but I think it makes for a more stable framework that's more reflective of what the community wants and a stronger community all told.
Another example of that was Ember CLI's node version support that they were talking about a while back, like which versions would the build tool support. And to use another Ghost example, Ghost has to run on like 0.10, 0.12, or 4. Those are the 3 supported versions of Node that we run on. And so a lot of the Node folks at Ghost were commenting on it, being like, no, we can't just drop support for older versions because our backend still supports this and there's no real reason to. So there's a lot of good examples why the RFC process it's a lot better than just here's the changes a little bit.
Waiting for Daddy to tell you what it is. Cool. Any other questions? Questions for Brett? Question about Ember? Going once? Going twice? All right, gang. So thank you so much for coming to Friends and Family Edition of Ember. Let's hang out and drink some beer until we outstay our welcome.
Oh, one more thing.
Yeah.
Killer Queen update.
Oh, please.
So if you went to EmberConf, you know what I'm talking about. If you didn't, Killer Queen is this 5v5 multiplayer cabinet arcade game that exists in like maybe 15 or 20 arcades around the country. And I don't think even that many.
Yo, it's like 8 or something.
Anyway, so at EmberConf in Portland, there was a barcade there that had one, and we all got addicted to it. And by just matter of luck, it's coming to Denver because of us.
Because of us?
Yeah.
Get the fuck out of here.
All right, so like the week after we got back from EmberConf, I like happened to mention it to a coworker. She happened to know a guy that like runs an arcade repair and sales shop here in Denver. Happened to mention it to him, and he happened to just decide to go buy a cabinet and have it installed somewhere. Yeah. There. All right, so that's the part. It's coming in June. She knows where it's going to be installed, but she can't spill the beans yet.
Oh, but like it's not like in Breckenridge or something like that.
It'll be in Denver.
I mean, so it's like one of probably.
Yeah, it's gonna be one of the one-ups.
Yeah, it's probably going to be a one-up. So it's like next month. It's supposed to be here. So we can start having Ember meetups there.
Yeah, also, the next Ember meetup is at 1.
Oh, you understand? Like the next morning, it was like, oh wow!
I have petitioned my HR department to get one here with no success. But I'm working on it.
Oh, it was like we played until like 3 in the morning or something, and we woke up and it was like